back to the JT Jorfi podcast. Today, my guest is Ivey Perez, and she is a breathwork facilitator. So thank you, Ivey, for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited about it.
So maybe we can start off and talk about how you discovered breathwork, kind of what got you on this path.
So I would say about 5 years ago, I was on a journey to deepen my connection with myself. It was right after the pandemic. There was a lot of things going on. So I felt like I needed a little bit of a reset, and wasn't quite sure how to get there. I didn't even know what breathwork was when I discovered it. So it was really a unique experience for me. I showed up to Costa Rica to a healing retreat, and one of the things that we did every night was breathwork. So this was my first opportunity to really take a deep dive into the practice, and to say that it changed my life is a complete understatement. I came back from the retreat, and it was about a year later that the opportunity to become certified was available. And I really wanted to take the time to sit with the practice and just kind of integrate everything that came up for me. I really wanted to facilitate from the heart. I didn't want it to be this ego-based, like, oh, this is great, I'm going to do it, all the time, everywhere, for everyone I encounter. I really wanted it to come from a heart-centered space. So I think that gap between coming back from the retreat and the opportunity to be trained was really pivotal for me. And so I got certified. I went out to Canada to be certified, and that's kind of how the whole entire journey started. And then everything began to kind of find my own niche in the certification process, right? And how I wanted to guide my sessions. So it allowed me for that flexibility.
Very cool. And maybe for those that have never done a breathwork class or practice on their own, could you describe maybe what your first experience was, what maybe someone coming in for the first time might expect to see and to go through?
Yeah, so I had seen videos online of breath work, and sometimes I feel like it could be a little bit scary, some of the things that you see, right? So I was a little bit hesitant when I found out that there was going to be a breathwork facilitator, and that's when I started to dig around, and I started to get in my head about it, and I said, no, I'm going to just show up and see what this is about. So if people think that breathwork is just breathing, and I said there's so much more than just breathing. There's this intention behind it, right? This intention setting of what do you want the session to bring for you? And starting with that intention really allowed me to go deeper. It wasn't about what I expected from the session, but more so like what I really wanted to lean into. I was able to kind of just sit with that and show up without that fear. And that's really what allowed me to deepen the practice. So I felt like there were a lot of body sensations that came up for me, right? Feeling tingly, feeling heavy, and then trusting the guidance and knowing that I was safe to feel those emotions, or that anything trapped in my body that was coming up. And I think that's what's really unique and great about breathwork, is that it's going to be different for every single person, every single time you show up. So trust the process and trust the fact that you are going to be guided by someone who's experienced, and it's going to hold that space for you to allow whatever needs to come up to surface.
Yeah. Now, would you say for a first-time practitioner, it would be maybe required or highly suggested that they have someone kind of there facilitating as a guide rather than maybe experimenting on their own? Or what are the kind of boundaries or lines around that?
I think it's unique to everyone else, to each person. I think you can throw on a track and do a guided breathwork session with someone, maybe through YouTube. There's so many different resources. But I think for someone who's ready to take that practice to another level, showing up in person and doing a session is amazing. I mean, the music, the ambiance, kind of having this healing container with other individuals who are there, that brings the experience to a whole nother level. So I think you can do a combination of both. Never done it before. I've had people show up that are, I've never done this thing, but I heard about it through someone else and I'm excited to try it out. And then there's other people who maybe have done a virtual breathwork session in their own space, and that's where they feel most comfortable for the first time. So I really think it depends on the person and what they're ready to receive.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, in the modalities that you've done and the training that you received, are there any maybe particular lineages or traditions or cultures that it pulls from, or kind of what was the type of breath work that you experienced?
Yeah, so it's more like of a transformational breath work, but elemental rhythm does go into the elements. So we breathe through the earth breath, the water breath, the air, and the fire. So for me, I connected it with my own Taino roots, which is the indigenous people of the Caribbean. That for me was the connection that I wanted to make. I wanted to be a unique breathwork experience where I could tie into my own indigenous roots. And so I use medicine music. I use, the elements to kind of allow people to ground and to feel centered. I play play instruments that either I've handmade or I've gotten in some sort of ceremonial aspect or from indigenous artists. So every single element that I bring into the breath work is unique to myself. And again, that's one of the great things about breath work is there's so many talented facilitators that can bring their own uniqueness into the sessions. And so for me, that's what really ties it for me. It's my own roots and how I can connect that to the sessions.
Hmm. Very cool. And could you describe maybe what's happening on more physiological level, as you mentioned the different elements and kind of fire, earth, water? What is maybe what's happening on the inside as the breaths are coming in and out? You're increasing them, decreasing them, increasing the volume. What's on a more body experience occurring during these sessions?
Yeah, so most of the time when we breathe on a day-to-day basis, we're breathing in through the chest area, which is really just shallow breathing. It's normal breathing that we do day to day. But for breath work, we're actually drawing the breath deeply down into the diaphragm and activating the parasympathetic nervous system. So as we go through, let's say, earth breath, so those are deep breaths into the belly, usually for the count of 4, out for 4. And as we move through the elements, we're increasing the breath. The quicker that we breathe, the shorter the time that we are in that breath. So with those deep diaphragmatic breaths, as you breathe through these elements, right, the deeper you get into the breath work, I would say probably like sometimes second, third, maybe even fourth round for some people, because the goal is really to get out of the thinking mind into the body. And once that happens, people naturally feel that shift. Like I felt when I really got into my body. And, there could be different sensations. Your body can feel tingly. It can feel very heavy. Sometimes people explain it like they feel stuck. And I'm like, well, instead of feeling stuck, how about you shift that narrative and maybe perhaps feel like you're grounded? And so that allows maybe feelings of panic or anxiety that can show up to kind of dissipate when you really focus in on those body sensations. Some people say that their auditory senses change. So as I facilitate, my voice can sound loud or sometimes muffled. Some people say my voice go away altogether, and I say that's natural when you're getting into your body and you're tapping into the subconscious mind. So if you feel like you traveled somewhere, just journey with the breath and just allow yourself to come back and join me when you're ready. Dreamlike images can come up, flashing colors, lights. There's so many different things. Sometimes there's a combination of those physiological feelings that people can feel, and other times they just feel, like they're really relaxed and they're calm. And, there's just different, it shows up so different for so many people. And I feel like the deeper you breathe, the deeper the experience and the more likely you are to feel some of these sensations in your body.
Yeah. Yeah, I know for myself when I've done some sessions with you and they've been really great and beneficial as far as you're mentioning, you bring an intention into it and then it's almost like going down a hill on a bike. You can put on the brakes, you can let them up if you want to get more speed. I like the fact that you can control your own breath to control your own experience and kind of pull it back a little bit if it's getting maybe a little intense or dive a little more deeply into it if you're feeling prepared for that. When you have kind of students or folks coming in for some of your sessions, what are the maybe typical things that they're looking to get out of it? Are there more kind of therapeutic intentions coming in, trying to heal things? Are they more almost maybe athletic or like oxygen increasing, lung capacity, things like that? What types of folks have been drawn to this practice?
I feel like I get a little bit of all the things you mentioned, but for the most part, it's mostly healing that I find is like the core of the participants that I get into my sessions. I work with a lot of clinicians that do therapy one-on-one with their clients, and they may refer them for this different experience, kind of to add tools to their tool belt to deepen their healing journey. And sometimes people just show up without that intention, and that's kind of what shows up for them. And breath work is kind of like planting a seed for them to move deeper into this healing journey. So it's nice to see that there can be benefits for all sorts of people, right? So if they want to increase their oxygen intake, this is a great way to do that because it's actually helping the lungs kind of expand and open up and allow people to breathe easier and actually show them how to breathe. A lot of us don't really know how to do that properly. So, they can get a lot of different benefits depending on what their, right? I always say what their intention is, but I say that breath work will give individuals what they need and not necessarily what they want. So they may come in for an intention of feeling relaxed or something, and they may get something completely eye-opening or this awareness of something that they were not even seeking, but it came to them subtly, and it's a nice way to then bring awareness to that and say, okay, maybe I'm ready to like take this a little bit deeper. And each time they show up, they increase that threshold of tolerance and maybe breathe a little harder and something else comes out for them. So it's really nice to see all that come.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of, I mean, I guess a lot of the magic around breath work is that there's not like a particular explanation for kind of why these things happen, why you might get into more of a dreamlike state in one session and maybe more of an embodied, grounded state in another one. But maybe from your experience, what kind of are those differences? Maybe why one time you would feel one particular way and another feel another way? Is it the amount of kind of oxygen in your blood? Is it maybe a chemical level? What's going on there?
Yeah, I think so. When someone first shows up, I find that a lot of people are kind of reserved with the breath. Sometimes it can feel challenging. So, it feels uncomfortable. People stop the breathing and then kind of restart, which is fine. I encourage people to take it at their own pace so they can feel safe in their bodies. But typically when people really find that edge, right, surpass their level of comfort, sometimes I remind people there's no growth in comfort. When we feel comfortable, we just feel comfortable. And there's not really this threshold that we're pushing past. So as people breathe, the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the body just allows us to access that subconscious mind a little quicker. And so when you're in this state of just accessing that subconscious mind, it's drawing out memories and things that come to the surface. And that's really where a lot of the healing work comes. The memories, the awareness around different topics or different things that are really stored in our body. So it depends on the breathing state, right? How deeply the person is breathing, and really also I think what they're ready to receive in that moment, because we're humans who kind of tend to pull back a little bit when things get a little scary. And I find that's okay. Breathwork is a practice. Continue to show up. And when you're ready for things to surface, it'll come naturally and then things will kind of integrate a little easier for those that show up to the sessions.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned it's a practice and a process. What's maybe like a typical or suggested number of times in a given week or month or year that you would kind of see folks going into breathwork sessions, and maybe like how long does each session typically last? Things around that.
Yeah, so breathwork is full experience. The ones that I facilitate is typically 60 to 120 minutes, depending on, the group size, to get the full experience and the full benefit of the session. I would say that doing an experience that is something that you should do probably, bi-weekly or once a month. It's not really something that should be accessed too quickly or after a session. There needs to be some sort of time for integration. I think that's really where the work begins. All right, we have the session, we have our closing circle, we share in the integration circle, but now taking that time to really integrate those experiences until you show up again. I mean, breathwork could be maintenance, right? So I encourage people that even though you're not going through this full experience, even taking 5 minutes on a day-to-day basis to really just focus on your breath and deepening that inhale in through the diaphragm, playing a soft track and just kind of taking a couple minutes to feel grounded, whether they're going into a stressful situation or they need it for relaxation at night. It's something that you can access, all the time. Our breath is accessible to us, but sometimes we forget to use it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but as far as the experience itself, I would say that between once every 2 weeks to once a month is probably a reasonable time to show up and do the work.
Yeah, I know of the ones that I've gone to, they are pretty intense sometimes and wouldn't necessarily want to be doing that every day just to have so much things to process. And like you're mentioning, that integration is kind of where the real work happens. Could you maybe talk a little bit to you what integration means and kind of best practices or ways that people can go about incorporating the things that came up during a session into their daily lives?
Yeah, so breathwork is just one of the tools, right, in our tool belt. There's so many people do different modalities of healing. It could be either speaking to a therapist or maybe just honestly just taking a walk in nature and connecting with the elements. Sometimes I tell people if things come up, or you just need some time to integrate everything that came up, do something that you love, something that's easy for you. Maybe that's cooking, maybe that's just playing music. Music is so therapeutic. It could be on a drive to work, just playing a track that you really enjoy. So that looks very different for a lot of people. Some people enjoy spending time with their children or fishing, sitting by the river, connecting with water. It looks so different for everyone. And I encourage people to really take what comes out of their sessions and just take it gently and allow themselves that time and space, whether it's journaling or meditation. It doesn't have to be anything structured or feeling like it's more work. but just allowing the thoughts to kind of come and to feel that ease that comes from everything that kind of surfaced from the session. And it doesn't even have to be, challenging things that come up. Sometimes people feel extreme joy in sessions, and I encourage people to lean into that joy. Like, why is it that when we feel joy as humans, we feel like we've kind of come to the top of the world and we need to slow down or stop? How do we lean into that joy further? And how do we feel like we are kind of like worthy of that experience of joy, especially for people who maybe haven't had a lot of opportunity in their life to feel joy? So, it's integration can happen anywhere at any time. You can't really time it out. There's things that come up and allow them to, and just bring awareness to the fact that now you know these things, and how are you going to move through life with a little bit more ease with that awareness that comes up.
Yeah, a big part of you're mentioning the awareness of the experience. I'm trying to think of what's the opposite. Just push it to the back of your mind, pretend like it never happened, and go about your life as if your day to day was not impacted. That you were pushing things back down to the subconscious. Is that what you're trying to basically avoid through an integration practice?
Yeah, just avoiding that things came up, or no, that's not real. That's not really what happened. That wasn't my experience. And I think that's natural for some of us, especially when things come up that are challenging that we're not quite ready to address. But just knowing, I say, it's like a flower, right? Every time you do breath work, it kind of just sheds a little petal, and, just allow it to gently fall without feeling like you need to do something about it, or the sense of urgency to address it right in the moment. It's like, okay, that thing came up for me. And maybe just like keep it in the back of your mind, and then realize the patterns or the connection that it has to other areas of your life. And if things start to show up organically, you're going to start to think, okay, I realized that came up in my breathwork session, and now I'm noticing it again. And I think naturally, as you start to unfold in this healing journey, you'll start to recognize those connections and those patterns. And I think it happens when people are ready, right? But what we don't want to do is kind of just ignore it and pretend like it never happened. But just sort of like, if you're not ready to deal with it in the moment, just say, okay, I recognize that that's there. And when I'm ready, I will kind of get back to it.
Right. Yeah, I think that one of the really helpful things going to these more formal sessions is when you're not in them, it does make you just more aware of your breath on a day-to-day basis. Like if I find myself in a state of stress or anxiety, and then noticing I'll typically be breathing shallow and really quickly. And then it's like, think back to the breathwork session. Okay, we're breathing like deeply in the earth one to stay grounded, and then basically snap out of it, snap out of the stressful response, try to mimic those deep diaphragmatic breaths. And like you were mentioning before, engage that parasympathetic nervous system. I guess do you kind of also in your day-to-day tap into those types of tips or tricks on how to breathe to ground yourself more, like any other maybe types of approaches that folks can take in their day-to-day to integrate and be able to leverage these tools?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely use breath work on a day-to-day basis. I don't use it only when I feel like these states of anxiety or something is troubling. I think I resort to it even when I feel good, to kind of keep me in that state. If I feel like I'm calm and I have a couple minutes to myself, I may just play a track and just maybe go from earth breath to water breath, and maybe a double exhalation to really deepen my state of relaxation. Sometimes for sleep also, I use a simple box breath. So it's not something that I use in my breathwork sessions, but it's a useful tool to just kind of get my body back into a good state. I always say that we're going to have peaks and valleys in our day. We're going to have moments where we feel like our level of anxiety peaks, or our nervous system is not fully reset. And then we'll have moments where we feel that low. And the goal is to get us into a center state quicker. And noticing, like you said, when you feel, okay, I should use my breath now. I even have a reminder on my watch that reminds me to breathe. So maybe once an hour, it's just like, okay, let me just take a couple deep diaphragmatic breaths just to get my body used to finding these tools quicker and quicker.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Have there been any particular people or inspirational instructors that you've come across that you want to kind of share with us, some folks to keep an eye out for and to study?
Yeah, so I'm certified through Elemental Rhythm. The founder, Gio, is amazing. He's an amazing facilitator. He practiced with Wim Hof. So a lot of the elements that you'll find in Elemental Rhythm utilize these techniques. And, you can always check out the tracks. There's some tracks that are available for folks that are interested to do the self-guided work. So maybe like a 60-minute session to really take you deeply and while you're at home, if you want to give it a try. And then definitely checking out, in-person session to kind of deepen that experience a little bit further. I have a lot of mentors along the way. I've feel like I've picked the things that I really love about them to kind of craft my own style. And I always consider myself a student because I think when we stop learning, we stop evolving. So anytime I sit with another breathwork facilitator, I'm listening and I'm learning from them too. And I think that's the great thing about being able to have this flexibility of your own style when you practice breathwork.
Cool. Yeah, thank you. Are there any other modalities that you see breathwork being kind of complementary to? Any other practices that you have in your kind of wellness routine that you kind of leverage the breathwork for?
Yeah, I think the breath is so important in a lot of different practices. I've trained yoga students in deepening the breath and how can you integrate the breath on the mat to allow people to get to a deeper state, right? When they're holding poses, the breath is so important. So whether you're doing yoga, whether it's a meditation, right? How can you integrate your breath into that meditation to kind of get you deeper into that state? Performance, right? I work with people who just are training for races and it's like, okay, how can you focus on your breath so that you can get out of your mind, right? And get into your physical body and also maximize that energy to hold you through the race. I've also worked with people who are going through childbirth. Like, how can you allow your body to do this very important thing, right? Becoming a vessel for a new life and allow your mind to remain calm while you're practicing those breaths through contractions. So I feel like breathwork is so versatile. It's amazing. And it's, it can be used in so many different facets.
Yeah, that's interesting on the childbirth one. I know there's a lot of different breathing classes out there and how to manage the pain response and things like that. So I bet you have a lot of interested folks in figuring out how to make that process more manageable. Now, you started hosting your own sessions. Maybe you could describe a little bit about your journey with that, finding spaces, finding the people, partners, and whatnot, and how did that all kind of come together for you to host your own events?
Yeah, so I had to like really get comfortable with kind of showing my face a little bit more on social media because I understand that with the day and age, that's, kind of where people go to find videos or, follow, individuals who do these kind of practices. I like to like try to maximize, that experience and allow people to see a little bit of the segment of the session. But I like to also make sure that I sort of value that sacred space for the people who are practicing. So it's difficult to kind of like put that all on social media and really give people a full reign of like, this is what you're going to experience. It's something they just have to show up and kind of experience for themselves. But I usually like reach out to local practitioners, whether it's yoga studios or friends and family that I have that do different practices. I've done breath work in hair salons, people who just come up to me and like, I heard about your breathwork sessions and I have the space, but it's a hair salon. I'm like, great, you have floor and space, we can make it happen. And I love that because really we could transform any space into a breathwork session.
Yeah.
Healing spaces that reach out to me to kind of bring breath work and add a little bit of a different spin to what they normally offer. I'm open to anything and everything, private sessions. I have experiences with kind of anyone who shows up and is, hey, we want to do this thing. How can we make it work? How can I integrate it with something that I do? Someone recently who does body work, lymphatic or drainage just reached out and said, hey, I want to do this workshop to do this and then integrate breath work. So it allows for the flexibility to segue it into anything that people already do and adding this breathwork experience to it to deepen that connection with their clients or with their community.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like just any sort of modality or other practice can benefit from such a core function of human existence. You can't get very long without breathing. The breath is so vital and so powerful. Have you noticed maybe it's gone a little bit more mainstream than in years past?
Yeah, I have. I think when you're not in the space, you're not really aware of how much it is sometimes mainstream. Like I said, when I first discovered breathwork, I didn't even know what it was. And then I kind of opened up my awareness into like all these practices and all these people that are doing breath work. And again, I feel like it's wonderful. I think there's practitioners out there that do great things in great spaces, but I also am very conscious about how I facilitate breath work and the accessibility to the people that I want to see in the spaces. A lot of it is mainstream. When I had my first breath work experience, there was like 70 other people there and there was no one that really looked like me or had similar life experiences. And so for me, I wanted to have this heart-centered practice and I wanted to bring it back home to people in my own communities, in my own spaces, and people that resonated with my practices and my cultural experiences. And so I wanted to kind of pull away from that mainstreamness of the practice, and I wanted to make it more a holistic indigenous approach that I think was very beneficial to this practice of breath work. But there's, again, so many different practices and so many different practitioners that just have their own spin, but it's definitely become very popular. And I just hope that those spaces kind of take this opportunity, and this responsibility to be a breathwork facilitator for the good and not really capitalizing on people's healing journeys, and things like that. And that's something that I'm really mindful of.
Yeah, no, it's kind of important to stress that fact to have a facilitator who you trust. I know that in my own experiences, and you're lying on the ground, you're breathing, you're kind of, as you're mentioning, your mind and body can go to these states that are not typical in a day to day. So you are in somewhat of a vulnerable position. So having someone facilitating the space and holding the space in a safe and loving way, I think goes a very long way in having a great experience. So maybe you also have brought this up in the beginning of your sessions on lobster claws, like with the tetany and like the muscles tensing, and explain what that is a little bit.
Sure. So they call it like the lobster hand. So it feels like there's this tension in your hands. And sometimes it can happen to your face or your feet where you feel like stuck and like you are unable to move those body parts. It's just because of, again, the breath, the exchange of this oxygen and carbon dioxide, it can clamp up your muscles almost, and you feel like you're unable to move those body parts. So I just try to explain all that stuff to individuals before the session so that when they experience these things, if they come up in their sessions, that they feel safe and comfortable in their bodies. And I say if something becomes too challenging at any point, you can slow down your breath or just stop your breath or raise your hand. I use Florida water in my sessions, and I feel energetically it allows people to kind of just relax deeper. So, I'll come around to them if something becomes challenging, but I notice that people are typically able to work through all of this, and there's no long-term effects of anything that any physiological things that come up during the session. But I understand that it can kind of cause people a little bit of panic when, you said it's not something that you naturally do on a day-to-day basis. So when you feel these things in your body, you can kind of like shy away from it and freak out. So my role as a facilitator is to guide people into these safe experiences and allow their body to like work through these challenges while feeling safe.
Right. Yeah. No, the first time it happened to me, I was like, oh gosh, like, is this bad? But yeah, the suggestion kind of just breathe through it and yeah, dial it back a little bit or maybe even increase it, kind of allow the energy to flow out. And then once you do kind of work through it, it's much more relaxed feeling that I was able to experience. You mentioned setting the space and the use of Florida water and some instruments and music. Could you talk a little bit about that concept of like cutting the container and what that looks like and keeping a space dedicated for it?
Yeah, I'm really big on setting an intentional sacred space. So I like to start on time. All of my sessions, anyone that works with me knows I like to start on time and be responsible for, people's time, but also make sure that, there's not too many individuals kind of trickling into the session once we've begun. And I know sometimes we can't control that. People run a little late, but I feel like it's important to settle in together, set that intention and start together and end together, to kind of energetically keep that kind of bubble secure and sacred. So I like to start off either saging the space or using Palo Santo to cleanse the space. I have some mists that are really grounding and are made by local artisans that make little sprays to clear out the energy in the space. I use Florida water, so I use it during my sessions to kind of fan it over people. So all of those little things, right? The instruments that I play, the drum that I handmade, all of that I integrate into my sessions. So I sometimes play them throughout the songs. Sometimes just bringing a drum to someone's heart center as they're breathing opens up something within them. I've gotten that so many times where they're like, I was breathing deeply and all of a sudden you started playing the drum or the maraca or whatever instrument I'm playing and you played it over my heart center and something just unlocked within me because there's so much medicinal value in these sacred instruments. So I feel like every little thing that I use, either whether it's my Taino deck cards, right? Allowing me to again further set that intention. Everything is very hand selected. There's nothing that I put out or that I bring into my sessions that I haven't thought through carefully because again, I hold that responsibility as a facilitator very seriously. And I understand that anything that I bring into the space, whether it's a scent or it's a sound, it could be a song that I play that really moves people's energy. Like, how am I utilizing that for the betterment of these individuals that are here in this space with me? So everything is very, very carefully crafted, from the music I select to the instruments that I play to the scents that you smell, the copal that I burn. Everything is very, very intentional.
Yeah, that attention to detail, I'm sure, goes far in the felt experience of the folks that are in the session. And you mentioned the music a lot and the kind of the heart and the beat of the drum, maybe matching with the beat of the heart. Are there particular beats per minute that you have for different portions of it, or what's I guess maybe the tempo and the pace that is as optimal as you've seen it?
Yeah, so it depends on the kind of session that I'm facilitating. If I'm facilitating a flow session that is a little bit more of deeper breathing with longer exhalations, the songs will be a little bit slower in nature. The rhythmic pattern will be a little bit gentler to allow for a deeper sense of relaxation. And when I'm doing a breakthrough experience, which is typically what I guide, the rhythm will be a little quicker, right? I try to not play too many songs that have words in them because I like to really allow people to dig deep within their own consciousness and not be guided by lyrics. So maybe like 100, 120 beats per minute, to kind of get people moving a little bit more. It could be a little gentler as we go into a flow session or double exhalation. So I try to like come up with a playlist before I have the session, but sometimes as I'm there, I'm like, I'm going to play the song because I really feel like the room is calling me to that. And sometimes I jump around through playlists and play different things depending on the energy.
Cool. Are there particular things that you instruct folks to do in advance to prepare for one of these sessions?
Generally, no, but when people reach out, I tell them, try to hydrate very well before the session, alleviate, the possibility of having a large meal before you come in, steering away from that, from anything deep in the belly. The hydration is very important pre and post session. So I definitely remind people of that after we finish off. If people reach out to me beforehand, I think it's really important to sit with that intention, right? Before you come in, like, what is it that you want to get out of this? Where do you see this kind of practice bringing you to? And I think that's important too, if you have the time to do that. But really, there's no like intense preparation for a session. I think it's in the moment, setting the space and being able to guide them from beginning to end once we've arrived.
Yeah, I think the hydration part is key for everything in life, especially when you're exchanging the air at a rapid pace. It can tend to, I guess the water vapors and stuff coming out get dehydrated a little bit more quickly than normal breathing. Anything on the horizon looking toward the future of things you want to incorporate or different things to explore within the practice?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to work with bigger community organizations, and I'm really passionate about bringing breathwork to under-resourced communities. So I'm always kind of posting things on social media. If you know of any groups, any men's healing groups, any groups within large cities that are looking for free or low-cost healing modalities, reach out to me. So I like to offer sessions for people that probably don't have access to breathwork or maybe have never heard of it before as a starting point to start to deepen their own practices. So I don't have anything particular in mind right now, but I'm open to experiences to work with larger communities or, maybe small organizations that are looking to connect with their employees or, with a community that they really feel can benefit from a practice like this.
Yeah, that was great. I would love to see that more of this stuff in work cultures and just have employee health days and things like that, incorporating breathwork. I think that could go a really long way. So I guess on that topic, where can folks find you? How can they reach out to connect?
Yeah, so people can follow me at brickcitybreathes. And when you go on my Instagram page, there will be a tree with a link to my website where I post most of my pages. And if you prefer to connect on email because you're not on social media, my email is brickcitybreathes@gmail.com.
Excellent. Well, yeah, definitely thank you very much for taking the time to sit down with me today. Any last thoughts you wanted to leave the audience with before we break here?
Yeah, I mean, breathwork is just like an amazing tool to kind of deepen the connection with yourself. If you're called to try this out and you don't really know where to start, just contact me and we can set something up. And looking forward to facilitating a session for all of you.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much again for coming on the show. And hope to be in another one of your breathwork sessions soon.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.